What's going on, everyone? So this past weekend we had a little bit of an issue with the 4Runner water pump and alternator belt decided to fail. It had been kind of making a little bit of noise, squeaking, tension it up, seemed fine for the most part. Ultimately, on my way to a friend's kid's birthday party, had the belt fail, saw the temperature going up, started making my way over to the side of the road to address the issue, and on my way to pull over, the radiator decided to explode, which made a loud noise, very loud noise. You can get a shot of that. Yeah, so not ideal, but there's a lot worse things that could have blown up under the hood. I was able to start it. Everything sounded fine. After it cooled down, everything sounded fine with no coolant in it. I waited for about 3 hours, 2 hours for the first tow truck that never showed up, another additional hour for the one that did show up. Finally got the truck home because I was not willing to leave it on the side of the interstate. I don't think that's very smart with these trucks, especially one in this condition. I don't think I would come back to it and it would either be gone or the wheels would be removed or stuff would be stripped off of it. Didn't want to leave it for a long period of time. Plus, you know, one would think the tow truck would show up in a reasonable amount of time on a Saturday, but apparently not. At least the first one didn't. But I do have some good news. Started going through everything. I replaced the water pump. Didn't need to be replaced, I don't think, but I went ahead and did it. So brand new gasket, water pump, new lower radiator hose. Already replaced the upper and the thermostat the week before. Obviously I needed a replacement radiator. Went to the local AutoZone. They said they had one, and these people are the most unprofessional people that I've ever experienced in an AutoZone ever. So bad so that I was like, I don't care if you have it. I don't care if nobody else does. I would rather drive another vehicle, ride my e-bike to work, than support this particular AutoZone. So I just walked out.
You suck, you jackass.
This is what we got to talk about, baby. All aluminum, TIG welded goodness from, you guessed it, China.
China.
And turns out that's where the Lylan ones are manufactured as well, that are sold on what's that called again? Car Pros, Rock Auto. Rock Auto sells Chinese radiators as well, and aluminum radiators for a lot more than this. And these have really nice reviews, at least from the guys that are running them in their pickups, their Toyota pickups and 4Runners. So first things first, let's see if it actually fits. So I'm gonna get a tripod set up. We'll try it out. I got a new camera set up as well, so I can kind of swing it around a little bit. Hopefully that is better for you guys. It's certainly better for me. It gets the camera up a little bit higher, so you guys don't see my double chin as much. I don't want to bore you with my double chin. I want to make you throw up, but yeah. So this thing looks pretty good. I'm gonna check over the welds, being that I'm somewhat of a welder myself. I want to check these aluminum welds, make sure there's no porosity in very important areas. Yeah, we'll start trying to fit it in, but I'll get a good shot of this shiny piece of metal so you guys can look at it, check it out. There's a few of these for sale on Amazon, and I'll put a link in the description, video description below. Oh, there goes my poof ball. Got some sharp edges, not the end of the world. I could deburr it. I mean, for a radiator that costs, I think I paid $150 for this thing. They're all the same, so far as I can tell. The ones that I found online, they look identical. They're all made in China.
It comes from China.
These are, I gotta tell you, the bulk of the tanks look like they're MIG welded. I've had enough of this shit. I have no qualms with returning something like this at all. I'll save this box and I'll return this right back to them. Rinse it out, give it to them in the same condition as I received it. Shitty, if it is. Does come with a radiator cap, which isn't too common. Welds up top are TIG welded. Side brackets, those are TIG welded. This bottom tank, to me, looks like it's MIG welded. Yeah, it's definitely MIG. So it's aluminum MIG on the bottom, aluminum MIG on the top. So the long runs, they are doing aluminum MIG, which is fine. Gonna look a little crusty. The top, where it is supposed to look nice, is TIG. You got a aluminum fitting into the side of this machined aluminum axle, whatever you want to call this, filler neck. fill neck. I think that's what they call it. That's all TIG welded. Get you guys a better look. So this right here feels okay. There's a little burr right here. This side is just all burred up. This is burr central. Burr central. This is supposed to be a triple core. So the tank's, the side right here, it's obviously pretty much non-existent. So it's more cooling surface area, and that is kind of what you're after in something like this. These older trucks, they just tend to run hot. So this will be a definite upgrade this summer. I don't smell any coolant inside. See plenty of penetration on the welds that I can see from the outside. We could have been a little bit better there. Looks clean inside, not really sooty or anything like that. What I do want to do is just kind of test fit it, make sure it's going to fit, even though, you know, I'd seen in the reviews that somebody had installed one of these on an 87 4Runner. You got to be careful about the reviews, because what tends to happen is sometimes they change up what they're actually selling on the listing, but the reviews will stay the same. I've seen where, oh, I'm looking at like an RC car or an RC plane, and I look down at the reviews and it's for RC car charger. It's not even the same thing at all, or to be a completely different car or a completely different plane. It's like they just change the listing and keep the reviews, the good reviews, to match and keep their stars up, their 4.5 stars or whatever. So let's make sure it fits. Once it fits, I'm gonna, you know, pull it back out, probably deburr it a little bit. I got a deburring tool, make sure it looks good. And then from there, get this thing connected and fill it up with some coolant, make sure that it's not gonna leak. Let it sit on idle for a while. Check for other leaks here and there. Big thing I wanted to announce is I do have a Redline Engine Builders Beast Cam that I'm planning on putting into this truck, which this whole thing right here threw a wrench in the plans, as well as a LCE long tube header. I opted for the black ceramic coat. I opted for the black ceramic coat because it's just, I don't know, these engines tend to get kind of dirty, and especially if you're off-roading or doing anything remotely dirty. That chrome or silver finish that it has on there, you're just going to be obsessing over that the entire time. So I don't know, I just thought black looked a little cleaner and it'll kind of match my style, my aesthetic. Even though shiny's cool, like this is shiny. Okay, so as far as fitment goes, the two things I want to check is the fitment to the actual radiator support as well as the fan shroud. Are you following me? My garage is a mess, so don't judge me. I know yours is probably a mess too. If you're this busy doing shit that you should rather not be doing because you should have changed your belt out, then your garage certainly looks like mine does. On a high note, I've got a kegerator that I eventually plan on hooking up. So this is the shroud. It's not in the best shape. They do sell these on Yoda Shop, I think that's what it's called, for 150, 160 bucks. If you can believe it, I washed this with the greaser and it still looks crusty. I'm sure I could scrub it harder, make it look better, but I'm just gonna buy a new one. That's what we do. Not saying I have money. I don't have money to be spending on shit like that, but it's all cracked and it sucks. So I'm not gonna glue it and try to rescue it. I'd rather get a new piece of plastic while I can, because if I don't do it now, it'll get discontinued because these trucks are old as shit. So it mounting to the truck, I think, is probably more important than anything else. So let's make sure we don't ding the fins up on stuff. Nice and slow. Good on that side. I think we are in a good spot with fitment. Thank you, Charlotte Douglas. So I'm gonna put the shroud on now because it's a lot easier to do that now than it is to do it later. Still waiting on an air filter. Ordered it from Amazon. It was supposed to be here yesterday, and of course it didn't show up because that's how these things go. This radiator was supposed to be here yesterday. Thank God I wasn't relying on that, because as these things go, it's always a day late and $1 short. That's what they say. Anyway, so I need to practice because I keep looking at my phone because it's connected to my camera. I need to not look at myself, even though I'm so handsome. This angle is doing justice. Okay, so your factory hardware, because they used what they call rivet nuts in the actual aluminum to be able to mount this to, so you don't have to through bolt it, which would be next to impossible if you wanted to take it out in the car. That would suck. That's not a very professional way of going about it, and they're not going to try to TIG weld aluminum nuts to this thing. That would be insane. With that being said, rivet nuts, the start of the threads happens to be a little bit lower than the OEM because it has to, by design, when it crushes, it needs to leave room to be able to crush. So you end up with like 16th to an 1/8 inch of distance further, and you really have to, plus this tabs having to be pressed on, you really have to mash them down. So I'm going to try my hardest to reuse these. If I can't, I'll try to find some screws to use, but I think these will work. The original fasteners are working. Just grab your ratcheting wrench and apply some downward pressure and she'll go in there. So previous owner put a bunch of just random ass screws in here. She'll have to change that in the future. Right now, just have to deal with it. You don't need to over tighten those. Plastic is pretty springy, plus it's like a little split finger deal, and it'll just spread out if you over tighten it. It's going to damage the plastic. Just not a good situation overall. Time to bolt it in. I think we could do it now. Let's get this stupid little hose out of the way. Get out of here, stupid little shit. Ooh, okay. Yep, that zip tie just tore up my fin, so we got to fix that now. Great. Just fucking great. So, look here. This is interesting, right? There's a lot of space here, and the radiator is actually tilted back to where, I mean, the fan shroud and the fan have 3/16 of an inch, 1/4 inch space at the top, and that's just how it's made. It's made at an angle, and I'm trying to figure out why. I'm like, why did they do that? Why did they do that? And I think the reason being is they needed it to clear the hood. They needed it to be, the actual filter neck needed to be in the clear here. I think they probably made one and slammed a hood shut on something, and oopsie daisies, because that's exactly what I probably would have done. So good on you, China, for figuring that one out ahead of time. You know, a lot of people on YouTube, they have like PCB Way sponsors and Send Cut Sand. Those are great. I really need like a beer sponsor. That would be ideal. And also Send Cut Sand, hit your boy up, because I am very good on CAD. And I do a lot of my own sheet metal fabrication. I did TIG welding and MIG welding and machining. I do all that stuff. I just can't show it because it's all that work. And I got a TIG welder, but I don't have, you know, stuff to machine with. And I certainly don't have a plasma table, and you guys do, so hook me up. Why it's backwards? It better not be backwards on the computer, because I'm going to be pissed off. I have to flip everything. Anyways, this is Lube Guard assembly goo. This stuff is great for gaskets. Instead of using silicone like I find in a lot of like these types of repairs, they use little dabs of silicone every once in a while, or adhesive every once in a while on a gasket to hold it in place. You just smear some of this on the mating surface and it breaks down. It's almost like a Vaseline, but it's green. It actually smells pretty good too, but it kind of makes it sticky. It just tacks up the surface, and you put a little bit on the actual surface, stick the gasket to it, stays nice and flat. It ain't gonna fall off. On this particular case, I probably didn't need it with the water pump because it's got 3 studs, which kind of hold the gasket in place. But it did keep it nice and flat and prevented it from getting kinked or something like that. So this stuff is great to have, and I'm going to use that on one of my bolts here to make sure it doesn't fall off the end of the socket. Just a little glob of that. That was the sound of the bolt dropping anyways. So on all of my fasteners, especially on the water pump, any kind of steel or stainless steel I think is subject to corrosion when it's put with aluminum. And I don't know, I'm probably talking out of my ass because I haven't done enough research on my own, but it's called galvanic corrosion. Galvanic or galvanic? Call it galvanic. Corrosion, dissimilar metals paired up together creates sort of like, especially when there's electricity flowing through something like there is electricity flowing through the block as a ground, you end up with corrosion, especially with coolant or anywhere where there's any kind of liquid based stuff like that where it's not oil, and it just gets crusty and nasty, and a lot of those like mating surfaces get really crusty. So on those bolts I like to put a little bit of dielectric grease. It just helps install the fasteners as a lubrication so they go in a lot better, especially when you're starting them by hand. And when you're going to torque them, it has that lubrication to help it torque properly and evenly. Little tech tip for you. Dielectric grease. It's a marine technician's best friend. And since I work on jet skis, I use a lot of it. All right, so I got 4 bolts started up. I'm gonna get that tightened rest of the way down, put the hoses on, and get this thing full of coolant, get the burp bucket on there, and we'll check for leaks. I kind of want to, it looked pretty clean inside of the tank, so I don't know if I need to flush it out, but maybe I should. I'll just run a hose through it real quick before I connect the hoses. Just run the water hose through it, make sure that drains out, then we'll connect it just in case there's any bits of aluminum or anything like that that might be inside of there from the welding, cutting process, any kind of shavings. I don't want that getting inside of the block. So that's why we're called degreeless engineering. We try to think with our heads and not with our computers. Okay, so I've got the radiator installed, all the belts are on there, everything's tight. I'm putting these little fasteners back in there, and if you touch, a fun little trick, a fun little party trick here, is if you touch your arm here and you touch that metal bracket right there on the actual distributor that holds the, what you want to call the connector there, it will shock you. And I don't know why it's doing that, because I don't have the key in the ignition. Just has power hanging out right there. Yeah, so it's probably because it's a capacitor. It's a big ass transforming capacitor. So do yourself a favor, don't do that, because that shit hurts. The one quick thing I should mention is once you do flush it out, if you decide to do that, before you, and obviously once you connect the hoses, before you start filling it up with coolant, make sure that the little drain petcock is closed, because this one was actually loose. Glad I checked it, but that would create a leak over time. Even if it's slightly cracked, it's not a good thing, so make sure that's tight. So upon installing this upper hose, what I did notice, because the radiator kicks back a little bit, it does kind of put that hose into a little bit more of a bend than it was before. I think that's going to be okay. The one thing you do have to remember is the air pipe, the intake pipe. It needs to be able to clear the hose. The hose needs to be able to clear it. So it needs that little bit of a droop in it to make sure that it connects. So don't cut it too short. If you see that, don't freak out. Don't start cutting too much off, because you will not be able to get your intake pipe, aka air pipe. Who says that? So the upper hose is connected. I'm going to connect the lower. I might open that little drain valve, the petcock, and just see if there's anything else that wants to make its way out before I start putting coolant in there. Fingers crossed that nothing happened with the engine. So this engine, when they built it, they put one of those blister packs on the side for overheating. They're black. A little dot in the center is black. When they overheat, they turn red. Mine did not turn red. It didn't run hot for very long. The water pump just stopped rotating. That pressure built up inside the radiator, and I have a slight hunch that maybe the radiator was starting to fail in the first place. So I started noticing unexplainable coolant leaks that were kind of spraying towards the top of my hood here in that direction. And why do Mustang guys always have to have the loudest car? Do they like that annoying shit? Because I certainly don't. Anyways, so I think maybe the radiator was on its way out, being that it ruptured kind of around the same area where it was getting wet. Initially, I thought it was coming from my thermostat housing, which it may have been. I went ahead and cleaned that up, sanded it with light grit sandpaper, brand new Toyota thermostat, O-ring, put some dielectric grease around in its little socket there, made sure it was nice and clean, put everything back together. Since then, I haven't really noticed anything, but I'm glad, let's just say I'm glad the radiator failed before hopefully anything else did. So let's get it put back together. I'll start filling this thing up and we'll check for leaks. Okay, so the factory cooling system says to take about almost 10 liters.
I was way off.
So in theory, you should be good with 3 of these jugs, but I went ahead and got 4. So it's good to have extra. Plus I've got other vehicles that may need coolant. So this is called a burp bucket. They're really good at burping the cooling system basically. So it basically keeps you a little reservoir of coolant just above the radiator, and it does exactly what it's doing right now. So it's currently filling up, and it does come with a lid. This is the brand I got, Thorstone. You can buy them on Amazon, I'm sure. They come with all kinds of different caps, adapters to fit different vehicles, so you don't have to worry about that. This one I had, this adapter, fit with this radiator, so we're good to go. Typically what I will do, what I've done in the past, is fill this thing up, run it for a little bit. Once I get it to where it's full, I will take the truck and put it up my driveway, which is kind of a hill. I wish it was a little bit steeper just for this, not for other things. Just find you a steep incline to put the vehicle on. If you want to put it on ramps, if you want to jack up the front end, either way, you really got to jack the front end of these things up to get all the air out of the system. Specifically, if you notice any kind of fluctuation with your throttle control valve, your idle air control valve, if you notice it kind of whoa at idle, two things that could be: air in your system, or you're low on coolant, or both. So if you notice that your throttle is kind of fluctuating up and down, that's what I would check. Make sure your coolant levels are right, and if they are, or they look deceivingly so, put it up on a hill before you replace the idle air control valve, which is coolant based. It basically acts like a little tiny coolant thermostat. Put it up on a steep hill, get you one of these, put a little bit of coolant in there, rev the gas, just blip the throttle on it, and just watch air bubbles pop out. Make sure heat is on too. You need your heat on. Make sure that that valve is open and that coolant can flow through there as well, because air could get trapped in there. As soon as you open up your heat to turn it on, you won't have heat. You'll put a bunch of air in the system, so on and so forth. So make sure that your heat is on. Put it on a hill, put a burp bucket on it, blip the throttle, and just watch air bubbles come out. They'll start getting smaller and smaller, and eventually it'll pretty much be nothing. From there, just make sure you have coolant in your overflow reservoir, and make sure you have a good cap. That's important. So the lid is super handy in situations like this when you're filling up the burp bucket, because as air is kind of dropping, well, the coolant's dropping into the air is coming out, it creates these bubbles, and it creates these little droplets of coolant that just go everywhere and make a mess. Got a little bit here now. Some of it's going to be unavoidable, but do your best. Fill it up until it stops flowing, and then fill it up some more. Just make sure you have some. That initial start of the vehicle, assuming my truck will start, because it was running off of just battery there for a little bit, and it's been sitting for several days. It may draw a lot of coolant at the beginning. Everything is holding up good, no leaks. Engine is running identical to the way it was before. Basically, we're just waiting for the thermostat to open up and really start moving some fluid. In that time, I think what I would like to do is probably spin the truck around, get it up on the hill with the hood up carefully, and just make sure we're getting enough air out of the system. Other than that, I hope you guys learned something from this video. I know I did. As always, this is Degreeless Engineering, a channel where we engineer using experiences like this. Thanks for watching.
It comes from China.